flying prices to the moon. The beers them waiting for the crash coming real soon. But the OG consultant watching, he's seen it all before. Over 40 years in the game, he knows the real score. Bull versus bear, a real estate fight. Peter Zalewski tell you who's wrong and who is right. In the Miami Condo investing club with no guess. He cuts through the noise and all of the mess. The Peter Zalewski Show. Big respect, OG in the game. Listen and learn the man's name. And up down. Peter Zalewski Show.
Happy Wednesday, Miami. This is the Peter Zalewski Show. It's 4 o'clock on Wednesday, and I do this show. It's Peter Zalewski. It's a one-on-one conversation I have with somebody I think you need to know. It doesn't matter if you live here, you just arrived, or you're thinking about coming down here. This is somebody you need to put on your radar. Why? Because they are going to probably be able to provide a service that could be helpful to you. Maybe not necessarily today, but maybe sometime in the future. I guarantee we're going to have a 1 hour conversation that you're going to find interesting. We're going to talk about all the variety of different topics. And who are we talking to today? We have a probate attorney. We have an attorney who's going to be talking about probate. We're going to be talking about a whole variety of things related to probate. Any of you know who don't know what probate means? It's basically when somebody passes that they don't have everything laid out. The entire family gets jammed up in the court system. They burn a lot of cash, and the heirs never end up with the money. Worst case scenario. So, but I don't know the details. She does. Let me go ahead and bring her on. She's the owner of her own law firm. She's got a number of different attorneys she works with. Her name is Nicole Loughlin. Her firm is up in Boca Raton, although she serves the entire state of Florida. Let me give you the proper name of her law firm. It's going to be Loughlin Law PA, and that, by the way, happens to be her website, LoughlinLawPA.com. All that being said, Nicole, how's it going? Thanks for making time for me and coming on the Peter Zalewski Show.
Hi, Peter. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You know, Nicole, somebody might hear probate, and they might be thinking, hey, I don't know if I want to get into that. I don't want to think about the future. I don't want to do any of that. But what I would tell them is let's sort of take a Buddhist approach. And a Buddhist approach means everything you have today is basically going to get worn down and it'll be less tomorrow. So what you need to do is you need to anticipate what's coming down the pike. Not that I'm a Buddhist. I did a little bit of travel in Southeast Asia. I read a little bit about it. But basically, you need to kind of identify what's out there, and especially in this real estate market in the Tri-County, South Florida area, where valuation's gone up tremendously. There is a lot of money on the table, as well as in the equity of some of these houses, these condos, all that type of stuff. So it's never too soon to sort of take an idea, put together a working list as to what you kind of need to do in order to keep everything in line, because you just never know.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say probate is something that you do want to anticipate. And obviously, you know, if somebody's already lost a loved one and they're trying to navigate that process, they're going to hire somebody like me to get them through the court process. But if you're somebody who has the ability to plan, that's the other side of it, right? The planning side to say, what can I do now to avoid that process for my loved ones, my family, to make sure that things pass seamlessly without court oversight in, you know, the best, most efficient way possible.
Yep. So Nicole, what I'm going to want to talk to you about is, and I got a whole variety of different topics. One is crypto. If I went out there and I bought all kind of Bitcoin and that Bitcoin went through the roof, what happens? I don't want you to answer it now. I'm going to kind of lay it out there. I want to talk about, listen, if I run up my credit cards and maybe when I tap out, does anybody got to repay it? And if not, why wouldn't I just max them? Another thing I want to talk about are car loans. What about all these car loans? What about their mortgages? Is anybody on the hook for that? And how does it all kind of play out? What are the repercussions? What are the tax advantages, maybe being in Florida versus the rest of the United States? I know you're not an accountant, but you are somebody who deals with the probate side. And what about Florida homestead? Does Florida homestead law, which is all encompassing down here and provides a lot of protection, it kind of reminds me of a story in when there was a failure of a large corporation called Enron. Enron went down, and one of their chief, I want to say CFO, he actually had a house in Boca Raton, which is where your law firm is located, and he homesteaded the property. When everything went sideways, he was still able to maintain that home. At least that was the urban legend, and maybe you can fill us in if you know anything about that. But the Florida homestead law is supposed to be very powerful, and I want to see sort of how that interacts too with probate. Does all that sound like it's something we can discuss today?
We can talk about it.
Nice, nice. Nicole, before we get into it, why don't you give everybody a little bit of an overview, an update, just kind of about you? How did you get into probate? Did you plan to go into probate? Is it a family business? Did your parents, were they in it? And then also too, what other kind of law have you practiced, or maybe kind of give some people some perspective if possible.
So I always knew that I wanted to be a transactional attorney. I knew that in law school that there were people that set out to be courtroom attorneys, and there are people who set out to be transactional. And there's criminal and there's civil and court related and transactional. So I knew I wanted to be a transactional attorney, but my first job out of law school was working with somebody who was a 30-year trial attorney with a ton of experience in civil litigation. And so I got a very nice foundation in civil litigation, personal injury matters. I worked a lot with condo associations early on in my practice, and then probate and estate planning. And when I transitioned to owning my own law firm, I was like, well, what are the things that I really love to do at the other firm? And I love the personal injury work, I love the estate planning, and I love the probate. So that was really the focus when I opened my firm. And then as time has gone on, I really sort of narrowed my focus to probate administration, uncontested probate administration, and planning, and specifically planning for families. And that doesn't mean that I don't plan for people that don't have a young family, but me personally, I'm a mom of 3 kids. I got 3 drop-offs and 3 pickups. Preschool, elementary school, and middle school. So I'm in it, and I happily serve people in that same position. I know how difficult it is to make decisions about who's going to be the guardian for the kids and what age do I think my kids would be mature enough to inherit assets and all of those decisions. So that's the focus of my firm is probate and estate planning. I still take the personal injury claims. I work with some of the best trial attorneys in the state of Florida. I work with a lot of personal injury attorneys on their wrongful death matters. And when they lose a client, a personal injury client, and they need a probate attorney. So I understand both sides of the transaction, and I'm able to really help get those cases through the process smoothly. For my colleagues who practice in similar areas.
Going off the cuff, maybe there's been a report about it or a study. Generally speaking, how many people are prepared, and how many people basically have to go through this arduous process, which takes 3, 6, 9, 12 months to kind of have the court work it all out. Attorney fees are run up. It takes away from the estate. Generally speaking, what's the percentage? 50-50, 25, 75, any kind of input or any you can share based on your experience, maybe any reports you've read?
So I don't have an actual percentage. I know that there's more unprepared people than there are prepared people. I can tell you that. But in my practice, obviously on the probate side, I'm dealing with people who are mostly unprepared, right? Because the family's coming to me and saying, I'm hitting this roadblock, right? I inherited this house, so I thought, and I'm ready to sell it. And they're telling me that I can't. What do I need to do? So most of the time, when people are coming to me, there was not a plan in place. Now, we can get into what happens when you have a will versus no will. Having a will, that technically there is a plan there, but that doesn't mean that you avoid the process. Right. So there are ways to plan where you can avoid the process, and there are ways to plan where you have some control after you pass away with who's in charge and how things are distributed, but you're still going through that court process where there's judicial oversight and we can talk about that. What does that process even look like?
Yeah. And I think that's the next, for me, that's the next question I have. So generally speaking, I did just a little bit of research, and it's not really something that I know much about, but a little bit of research. I guess the word probate goes all the way back, 500 years or something? This is something that's been around. It's a Latin word or something that means, what does it mean? Like official, or it's on the record, or it's been finalized? Do you have any kind of insight? Can you tell us a little bit about the history? Like, how do you pull probate? Like, where does it sort of come from? It's not part of the normal lexicon or colloquialisms, obviously. Any kind of little insights, little nuggets you might be able to share with the audience?
So I don't know about how far back I can go with the Latin phrase, but I can say that a lot of people confuse it with probation, right?
Yeah.
And that they're not the same thing.
Okay.
Like simply put, probate is a court supervised process. It happens when somebody dies and they own something in their name. That means they didn't jointly hold it with somebody else with rights of survivorship. We can talk about that in the real estate context, but not only
Yep.
that, like bank accounts, things like that. They didn't have a beneficiary designated for a pay on death or a transfer of death beneficiary. So they own something in their name alone. And you're probably aware of this when somebody passes away. Nobody's opened anything with the court yet, but all of a sudden the property appraiser changes it from the person's name to estate of, right? And that's the fiction of it. Anything that you owned after your death, well, you no longer are here, right? So now it becomes part of your estate. And that's what needs to get probated. So the probate process is you petition the court to open the estate, put all interested parties on notice, marshal the assets, put creditors on notice, pay the valid claims, and then distribute according to the terms of the will, if they had a will, or according to the law. And something I always tell my planning clients, if you don't have a will, the state of Florida has you covered, right? Maybe not in the way you would want to be covered, but there is a backup plan. And so that's the Florida intestacy statute. And it basically says where your assets go when you pass away if you died without a will. And you may not like that. It won't take into consideration people you were really, really close to, if you were engaged, if you were living with somebody for 30 plus years and you weren't married to them, right? If you had stepchildren they were very much your children, but they were not your legally adopted children, those people don't inherit. So there is a statute that kicks in, but it's not always what people want.
So I guess in my terms then, the state of Florida set up some sort of process in which they will follow, and the way that you can basically circumvent the process is to come up with a will. Is that basically what it comes down to?
Essentially, yes. And a will alone is not going to be a probate avoidance tool, but
Yep.
it does a few things. Number one, if you have minor children, it's going to allow you to name guardians for your minor or minors. Number two, it's going to allow you to appoint a personal representative or nominate a personal representative. They have to qualify and the judge has to appoint them, but you nominate who you want to serve. And that's the person who's basically going to be in charge of administering your estate, right? They're the boots on the ground. They're going to hire the attorney. The attorney is going to be the liaison between the personal representative and the court. And they're going to be, in charge of marshaling the assets, notifying creditors and all that good stuff. And then lastly, the will is going to state how the estate is going to be administered, where the assets are going. And so this is where you're able to circumvent the default rules. Not all of them, right? We'll talk about homestead. We'll talk about if you're married. We'll talk about, all the, there's some limitations, right? You can't just do whatever you want. But the will is going to allow you to leave your estate to the people that you want.
Interesting. But generally speaking, when someone passes, there's a whole process that the government requires you to go through. And I guess that's just to make sure that everything is on the up and up. It's all standardized. It's whether it be for statistical purposes or economic purposes. But there is a process that every single person at their passing will have to effectively go through. Is that kind of how it works?
Anybody who has assets in their name alone,
yep.
Somebody wants to get those assets transferred from the estate to either the heirs under the default rules or the beneficiaries under the will, they have to go through that court process. So there are going to be people that planned really well and there's no assets that need to go through probate. Maybe somebody didn't own anything, right? Or no, but there's no property, there's no bank accounts, or they were bank accounts, but they were beneficiaries, right? Those are not going to have to go through probate. But if you own real estate in your name alone, if you own bank accounts, if you had investment, life insurance, and you didn't have beneficiaries named, they weren't in a trust, then yes, you have to go through this court process. And the point of the process is to make sure that the estate is administered in a way that protects interested parties and creditors who may